Good morning, or good afternoon, or good morning again. I was just trying to figure out what time it is across the world. I better give you the date first of all. It is Sunday, April the 7th, 2024. And it's around midday in Ireland, the United Kingdom. It's 1 p.m. in France and Germany. And I suppose it's probably still the middle of the night, if not very early morning on West Coast America. And maybe there are some early birds getting up on East Coast America on a Sunday morning. And I think that it's probably technically Monday morning, very early Monday morning in New Zealand and Australia, Japan, and other places like that in the Far East. But that's just a little small preamble, really just to get the vocal cords working. The title of this stream is called Dishonorable Discharge. Not that I have any military experience myself, but when I read this, I realized, this kind of behavior is not exclusive to the military or that organization, whether it be the US military or any other countries. It's exactly the same kind of mentality and method of operation, modus operandi, that you see in all corporations. And really, the military is just a different branch of one global corporation. Very much, really. It's not just a way of thinking about it. I mean, that really is the structure or the hierarchy of the organization. But look, that's just a little preamble. I'm going to get into it now. Somebody sent me something to have a look at on a website. I'll put the link later on. There's no point in calling it out now. I'll put the link later on into the description if you're interested in reading it yourself. It starts out, anyway, from a fellow who says, 20 years ago, almost exactly, actually, the United States Army utterly destroyed my life and my career, caused me massive trauma, nearly drove me to suicide 3 different times, obliterated $140,000 in assets that I had very carefully accumulated over a decade, falsely accused me of crimes, falsely investigated me, failed to prosecute me, and then threw me out with an honorable discharge because I was causing too much trouble, daring to retaliate against them via congressional investigations. Now, I've certainly recognized that particular trait, that if they trump up some charges against you, false charges, and then proceed to prosecute you in some kind of kangaroo court of their own making where they set the rules, then if you fight back or defend yourself too vigorously, then they start crying foul, like, oh, how dare you defend yourself robustly? How dare you? We expect you to roll over. We expect you to just accept that we're, basically prosecuting you under some kind of show trial. We expect to use this to show the others in this organization that they should never do anything that might either embarrass us or get in our way of what we want, whatever those things might be. Well, then, if you fight back, we'll take that as, I suppose, proof that you're guilty, and that you're a terrible person, and that we'll claim that you are aggressing against us. We'll call you violent, and we'll say, "Oh, look, what we always said about this guy. It's true. Look at his nasty characteristics coming out. He's exerting violence on us." So that's the kind of attitude they they adopt. The effrontery of it all. How dare he? How dare he try to defend himself? So anyway, another respondent in a thread of this discussion says, "Brother, we are alike." And this is the longest post, which made me kind of realize, look, I'd better read. It says, "Brother, we are alike. As my experience with the woefully corrupt institution known as the US Army is eerily similar, albeit 2 decades after yours. For the first 10 years of my military career, I was enlisted in the Marines. There I enjoyed an exceptionally successful career. I had applied numerous times for commissioning programs, and despite a perfect record across the board, all they wanted for those things were grunts who ran fast. Intelligence didn't matter. Ultimately, I applied for a similar program in the Army and was readily accepted. I remember all the officers in my Marine unit lining up to tell me how much of a mistake I was making. Jaded from the snubbing on the part of the Corps, I didn't listen. I went to OCS, graduated first in class, moved on to flight school, graduated first in class, same with instructor pilot and maintenance officer courses. All was right. I was selected for test pilot school. At this point, my battalion commander viciously accosted me, calling my path cowardly and total bullshit, vowing to end it. I told him politely that he had no room to try ruining me. 2 weeks during the summer of 2017 elapsed. I was summoned to my leadership's office to be read my rights. The charge? I was accused of having attended the events at Charlottesville, that I was an avowed white supremacist, and that I was having affairs with no less than 3 women. During their Scorched Earth campaign, they relentlessly harassed and threatened my now ex-wife, my parents, friends, you fucking name it. They fed my wife full of lies and had her fired from her GS job, resulting in her leaving me. If that wasn't bad enough, they had my orders to test pilot school and my pending selection for promotion to lieutenant colonel revoked. Despite the mountain of exculpatory evidence, including a duty journal identifying me as the division duty officer during the Charlottesville weekend, and no less than 50 letters of recommendation, the command recommended that I be discharged under other than honourable conditions. Just pause briefly there. I'm going to take a drink of water, and I see that I have a couple of comments already there. Thanks. I'll say Jack. I suppose I'll put it up on screen. Sure, isn't it written there? I'm always trying to be careful not to, give away too much information, dox people, that kind of way. But he says, cheers, congratulations on 500. Yes, I know. I won't be celebrating too much, though, because what I've noticed about the way that subscribers get added to my account, or people subscribe sometimes, that there could be a lot of different reasons for this, but sometimes it'll kind of go up 1 or 2 and then come down 2, 3, 4, and then go up, 1, 2, 3. And, it's 1 step forward, 2 step back a lot of the time. So I try not to pay too much mind to it. But yeah, 500, I suppose, is a significant enough figure in these small little whirlpools and eddies of the internet. I'm glad of it anyway. Some people might have subscribed by mistake. Right? I know I've done that sometimes by clicking to pause a YouTube short, and you actually accidentally click subscribe because they've moved the button up a little bit. But anyway, so Jack says, there, yeah, I gain and lose every day. A fellow, I mean, he's somebody who I'd be pretty sure listens to your channel and a few others in this little circle of people, whatever we have in common. I suppose there's a couple of things we have in common. One of the things is that I can safely say we all resisted the thing they tried to impose on us in 2020. And so I suppose always looking for people who are conscientious objectors, rebels, but people who rebel against the right things, people who rebel against illegitimate authorities, people who set themselves up as being our betters and who aren't, and we know that they aren't. So people who have a little bit of gumption in us, or a moral compass, and we follow it, that's what I think might be what we have in common, even if we don't always agree on every aspect of every detail. Like-minded, that's a short way of putting it. All right, Jack. I tend to drone on a bit. I'm going to get back to this article now here, right? Somebody else in our circle sent this on to me, and I read through the thread, and I was planning on doing the live stream later on a totally different subject, which I might still do. But I said, look, I'm not really doing anything much else. I'll get on and I'll just do a quick one, So anyway, carrying on anyway, this fellow was told that he was going to be dishonorably discharged. So he says, despite the command's insistence to hold a board of inquiry, I demanded a trial by court-martial. A family member, who is a county-level prosecutor, took a leave of absence to represent me. The clown show proceeded to an Article 32 panel, similar to an indictment hearing. There, despite the slanderous statements of the prosecution, the truth came out. My former commanding officer admitted to the threats, and the other witnesses, in inverted commas, were unmasked as co-conspirators. Best yet, my attorney played a recording of a conversation he had with an SJA prosecution paralegal, where the most damning admission of all was made, when this individual said, and in quotes, "We do our best to respect due process, but if that doesn't work out, we just make do." I mean, that really describes the kind of modus operandi that I recognize. It's the kind of fruits that I recognize them by. They'll play by their own rules, which they instigate, which they make up for their own benefit. And then when suddenly playing by their own rules doesn't benefit them, then they move the goalposts. They change the rules, or they say, oh, well, the rules only apply to you because they constrict or restrict you in some way. But if they ever restrict us, then those rules are bad rules for us, so they don't apply to us. That's the kind of behavior and carry on that I recognize all the time. And also, and lots of other people who used to be on my side. But all of a sudden, when the standards that they claim that they uphold suddenly become too arduous, and they don't suit them once in a while, then they go, oh, those standards are impossibly high. Your standards are too high, they say to me, You must reduce your standards. You're not living in a perfect world, This kind of blancmange type of attitude, where they suddenly become all weak and floppy, jelly-like, when suddenly the rules become a little bit too restrictive for them. Okay, moving on. The hearing officer dismissed the case on the spot and ordered my records cleared of all matters relating to the case. Yeah, so expunging everything like it never happened suits them as well. Gets rid of the embarrassing details of their inglorious defeat at their own game. All right, back to the article here. I may have been cleared, but it was evident right away that my reputation had been left irrevocably tarnished. In the court of public opinion, I was guilty and merely weaseled my way out of conviction. A few days later, I was summoned to the commanding general's office, where this two-star made an emotional appeal to retain me. He offered any assignment, any location. Yeah, so they just want to, reassign him somewhere else to get rid of this embarrassing problem. And everybody else on the base will then say, who? He? No, I never heard of him. No, I don't remember that. And then get rid of him from the official records as well. So it's like he never existed. Must have been a different fella by that name. That's the way they always do it. And I'm speaking from my experience at corporations, by the way. I told him I only had one request, that my orders to test pilot school be reinstated. He said, out of the question. I told him there was nothing further to discuss, and I walked out. On the record, to this day, not a single one of those mother effers who had a hand in destroying my career had been troubled to answer for their despicable actions. In fact, all have since been promoted and continue to hold positions of trust. I filed for retirement that afternoon and left the service 9 months later, but only after filing a congressional to get their lazy asses moving. 21 years from private all the way to major. No ceremony, no kind words, no certificates, and not even an effing flag or a handshake. Just a DD-214. I've since moved on to much better things, but what the army did still leaves a deep wound. I will never forgive what they did. Nobody should have to go through what you or I had to go through. Nobody should ever have to serve under such toxic circumstances, and I genuinely pity those who readily would. Nothing would give me more satisfaction in taking the army to task in court, seeking billions in damages on behalf of all who have been wronged by this corrupt and toxic institution. To those reading this, keep your children and others from joining the military at all costs. It is not worth it. Besides, if things keep going the way they are, if they join, they are as good as dead. We all have work to do. Tough times are ahead. Be ready. Hail victory. So obviously, with this a long thread here, I might go back and read a bit more of the original post in the thread. Somebody says here, reading yours and his stories is rough, man. I can't imagine having an entity like that coming after your family. Hail victory, says another. I did 4 and got the F out before S got too deep. Now, the guy who wrote that long post there that I just read out, he says, his name is, I might as well read out his username, it's Spartan118. He says, if there was anything good to come from the US Army experience. Sorry for the pause there. I've just gone back to double check that, yes, indeed, his name is Spartan118. So he says, if there was anything good to come from the Army experience, it was this. 1, I now truly know what toxic and corrupt leadership looks like. 2, it is exponentially easier now to smell a lie. Oh yeah, well look, that's the way it is, right? I mean, unfortunately, there's no greater teacher than experience. And I wish that I had had all the experience that I have now and might still live to acquire in the future when I was younger. And I wouldn't have made all these very silly mistakes, and I wouldn't have allowed all these people to take advantage of me, people who weren't really very clever at all, but they had a instinct for acquiring things by skullduggery, a natural talent for that, and for basically using other people to get what they want. So I would have been able to smell out, people who are liars and deceivers much easier if I hadn't have thought that naively, that we were all just here to help each other. Number 3, I know exactly how not to lead and run a business. 4, we've all been lied to all these years, and several of my friends died. So some Wall Street, I can't really say this word. It's the K word meaning circle. In Dutch, it's keikel, means circle. Maybe that's Greek, actually. I think both the languages. So some Wall Street, I pretty much said it, portfolio could go up by a couple points. Number 5, gradually, I began to hate them. And then, it goes on, and another fella says, and now no one wants to die for, and put whatever you like there in brackets, in radiating brackets. I might as well go on because I've just been streaming, just looking at the clock here for just a little bit over 20 minutes. So I did want to do a short one, but I think if I keep it under an hour, that'll be short for me. So I'll go at least for a half an hour. I'll read one more reply and then go back to the original and read a bit more because it's to do with motive as well and what grubby little ambitions these people have, and for what little they will absolutely F you over, smear your name, smear you into the ground, and blackball you, and make sure that you do their best, at least, to make sure that you never work again, or if you do work, that you'll never be promoted again. You're marked forever as somebody who is not to be promoted in any walk of life because you're not an order follower. This fellow says, I did 8 years and got out during the Clinton regime. I can't say I could have predicted it was going to get this bad, but I saw the first glimmerings of it after the tailhook scandal. Good officers' careers were ended just because they stayed in the same hotel as alleged incidents. My God. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. You want to be quite far away from a scandal by happenstance. You have to live the perfect life, really, not to be caught up in the crossfire of scandal, so to speak. He says, my brother just retired after 32 years. He managed to spend a lot of time deployed, so he avoided a lot of the intense toxicity. But he has similar stories. Now, let me just go back to the original post here to talk about the grubbiness and the most vile of desires and wants which they have, and for that then they'll prosecute or persecute anybody who resists. It speaks to the kind of Illuminati parties, that is maybe depicted in Eyes Wide Shut, Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut. These kind of parties where people swing, or there's pineapple parties. The pineapple symbol implies swinging. People putting their keys in goldfish bowls and this kind of thing, so that everybody's mixed up with everybody and everybody has sordid dirt on everybody else. And that's just the minimal amount of it. So the fellow originally, he says, 20 years ago, who started the thread almost exactly in the United States, army utterly destroyed my career and my life, caused me massive trauma, nearly drove me to suicide 3 different times, obliterated 140,000 in assets that he had been very carefully saving over a decade, falsely accused him of crimes, falsely investigated him, failed to prosecute him, and then threw him out with an honorable discharge because he was causing too much trouble, in fighting back, daring to retaliate them via a congressional investigation or two. So he goes on to say, this cost me a TS or an SCI security clearance, as high as it goes, and the ability to work in my field ever again. And just for fun, they put a felony charge in my FBI file and never told me about it. This happens all the time, by the way, as I was to find out, which cost me countless jobs because I would apply not knowing the false record was there. I only found it by accident 12 years after it had been done. Why was all of this done to me? Because a BDE HQ company first sergeant wanted to F my wife. You see, that's what it's all about. If somebody, one of these scurrilous weasels in management above you, an officer somewhere, says, I want that, then he'll just get rid of whatever or whoever is in his way. Just incredible. I say we in very, very heavy quotation marks that are dripping with sardonic effect. We are not the good guys. Not including myself in those people, but this is what we're fighting for, everyone, so that people like him can F other people's wives in the same army. Right, continuing with this, he says, so I just got off the phone with a lawyer. For $15,000, I can get that record expunged. 20 years after the fact. 20 years after the damage has been done. Can I seek punitive damages in civil court? Sure, if I have a spare 200,000 to operate in the, and I can't say this 3-letter word, but you know what it is. Owned civil courts. Same letter as what justice begins with. There is no guarantee of outcome, though. And then he says, in all caps, never let your child anywhere near the United States military. It takes nothing for them to permanently destroy your life, and there will be nothing you can do about it. And he says, sorry about the wall of text. It wasn't really. But he says, I'm effing angry. And so he should be. And the response to that is, that's why we call it the legal system and not the justice system. Right. Well, look, I think I'll probably leave it there, and I'll just wrap it up by saying that same spirit that runs through the army, the exact same modus operandi, the exact same behavior, the exact same moral decrepitude that we see in these commanding officers. Like, it's an inverted pyramid now. If we would consider the pyramid to be a hierarchy of morality, like up to some kind of godliness, some kind of perfect, blemish-free way of living your life, and everybody's just aiming for that level of integrity and morality, and upholding your principles. So through what I witnessed only in my little lifetime and working career, I'm sure, of course, I'm not under any illusions. It started long before I was born or even my grandfather was born. But by a process of death by 1,000 cuts, every single person, maybe there's an exception here or there, but I doubt it. And even if they are, good men, they're men who are keeping their heads down until retirement. That's the way it always goes. There is nobody in any organization or institution or corporation or military They're all just different words for different types of hierarchies, but they all operate the same way. Everybody, like SH1T, rolls downhill, orders flow from the top. And everybody who could possibly either give a good and correct order from the top, or who could arrest a bad order, an illegitimate order, an illegal order, or an immoral order in its tracks and say, I refuse to carry out this order and I refuse to pass it on down to those below me. Anybody who would be honorable enough to say, no, I conscientiously object to that, has been systematically removed from every system that we have, from every organization that we have. So every organization and every corporation, as far as I am concerned, is illegitimate and should be treated as suspect. And that if ever a good order, a good sounding order, were to seem as though it came from the top, we should be extremely suspicious of it and treat it with the highest level of criticism. I mean, not just to criticize it, but to examine it, to sort of say, this sounds good. I should still have my highest level of alert, though, and meticulously examine it for its sting and its tail, even if it sounds like a good thing to do. Everything should be treated with the highest of suspicion and caution. So that's about it. Like, we are in a situation where there are still people who have emotional attachment to organizations that they felt were good when they were children, or that might have brought them up in some kind of good way, or might have been something that either fed them financially or with actual food, or fed them some kind of ideas that they still hold on to and think are good. That may be so. That's pretty much how they do it. And in fact, we see a lot of the bad actors, individuals, like say Ben Shapiro, but even Candace, who appears to be standing in opposition to him. All of these people will one day be the Judases who betray us. And whether they know it or not, even if they tell us 99 wonderful things that are true, either they know this because they're planning it, or their masters will tell them to do it. One day, the purpose of everything that they ever did will be to try to slip a lie past us because we trust them. So in the same way, corporations, whether they were created to act as agents of destruction, or whether they were subverted at some point along the way, is often an academic or only of academic interest, because what corporations and organizations, institutions, whether they be religious or military or governmental or whatever, they will be used to give us illegitimate orders and to plant false ideas in our heads and to act as the agents of destruction of our civilization. So we all have to act as our own moral guardians. And if you believe in a God, a good God who represents the pure, the purest way of thinking and acting in all things, a good God. If you believe in that, then you must commune with him individually and don't allow any other man to tell you what is good. Decide that for yourself and you'll know it. I mean, the first step will be consistency in your beliefs. If anything contradicts itself in yourself, in your set of beliefs, then obviously that'll tell you that something must be wrong. If two beliefs that are in your head contradict each other, I mean, that's just the beginnings of discernment, or rooting out bad ideas that might have been planted in your head, or that people might be trying to plant in your head. But look, I won't pontificate anymore. People don't like when they're told what's good and bad. Equally, they don't like when they're told, decide that for yourself. The main point here is that all of our institutions are corrupt, and there's no point in joining them, thinking that you can make them good from the inside out either. So what must be done, I don't know, is probably what's inevitable. Everything will eventually be destroyed. Everything will be razed to the ground. And unfortunately, whatever comes out of that will be whatever has a will to power the phoenix rising from the flames. But I would like to live in a world where the way that it is structured is based off of something more than just the pure, naked ambition of somebody who wants to hold power for its own sake. They have no principles. They'll espouse any principles, whatever principles help them to climb that pyramid or ziggurat or ladder to the top, and then prevent anybody else who might depose him from getting anywhere on that chain, to use all the different kind of metaphors. Look, I said I'd leave it at that. I suppose what's frustrating me is I'd rather live in the aftermath than in the pain, in the painful, inexorable, but slow, interminably slow decline. Okay, cheers. I'll leave it at that, and I may speak to you later on today. Goodbye and good luck.